So again, we're thinking about order of operations in this section. We started by talking about exponents. Before we get into our order of operations problems, we do have one more thing that we want to talk about. We want to talk about square roots. So when we're dealing with square roots, we are going the opposite direction as we would be if we were squaring a number. So we know that 5 squared, 5 times 5 is 25. We also know that negative 5 squared, right, in example B above. We had a negative base, negative times negative also gave us a positive 25. When we're doing our evaluating of our problems, we want to make sure we're only getting one answer. So we're going to use our square root symbol to imply the positive, or what we call the principal square root. So if we see a square root sign around a perfect square, our square root of 25 is going to give us a positive 5. We're only going to use our positive square root. If we see a negative sign out front of our square root, then we are going to get a negative answer. So the negative square root of 25, or the opposite of the square root of 25, thinking about our terminology from previous sections, is going to give us negative 5. So looking at example 2, our square root of 36 is going to be 6, right? Because 6 times 6 is 36. Square roots, remember, we need to have the exact same number times itself to get that square root. I mentioned briefly at some other point, we can also use our multiplication table to assist us with square roots, right? Our positive, so we're looking at our numbers, positive or negative. We don't really need to worry about our negative signs as we're doing our evaluating. We can use that diagonal going down our square root. For B, we have a negative sign out front, so that simply means we're going to get the opposite of our original answer. So we put a negative sign in front of our square root of 36. Instead of getting a positive 6 for an answer, we're going to get a negative 6 for an answer. Right, now there is a difference between having a negative sign outside or inside. If we have a negative sign inside, then we are going to say our answer is not a real number. We cannot take the square root of a negative number, right? Because in order to get negative 36, we would have to have one positive number and one negative number, right? We would have to take negative 6 times positive 6. Those numbers aren't exactly the same, so it is not a perfect square of a real number. At some other point in other mathematics classes, you might end up talking about different ways of handling negative square roots. But for us right now, if we see a negative inside a square root symbol, we just want to identify that as an answer that is not a real number. Right? And then lastly, if we see a 0 inside there, square root of 0 is always 0 because 0 times 0 is 0. And so we can include that in our evaluation of square roots. So when we're looking at our square roots, pay attention. Do we have a negative sign? Is it outside of our square root or radical symbol, or is it inside our square root radical symbol? And that's going to make a difference in how we answer our questions.